Can you hear me?
Our cell phone is so personal to us.
It's become a throwaway item.
Yeah. Nothing gets repaired. Most of the stuff gets replaced.
This is right on top of the Superphone.
Right on top of the Superphone site.
What we saw in China was really a cyber age nightmare.
Hello. It's a big leap to make, isn't it? From a gorilla to mobile. I think it's for you. Why are we continuing to produce these toxic time bombs? Hello. No, I just got to New York. Yeah, oh, hang on 1 second. My other phone's going. Sorry, no, not you. 1 second. Hello. Oh, I've lost both of them. Even with 2 mobile phones, I still can't stay connected. And the crazy thing is, I'm even thinking about getting a third just for my emails. With all these complex components going into manufacturing one of these mobile phones, have you ever considered the impact on the environment? Not only in making it, but what is the impact when we're done with it?
It took 2 decades to sell the first billion mobile phones.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Today, more than 1 billion are sold worldwide in a single year. That's a lot of high-tech gadgetry, keeping us in touch. I'm off to call on some experts who know exactly where my cell phone begins. The consultants here at Frog Design Studio in New York work with phone companies to improve their sustainability practices.
Yeah, David, we took apart a few cell phones here to show you what goes into them. Here, this one that we're talking about here is just what we call a basic flip phone. You've got the keypad that you touch, but it's just not the keypad. It's the plastic and the rubber that's used in the keypad. These are the actual switches that you are clicking when you're touching that.
See, yeah.
These are all the little LEDs that light up the keypad. In this particular phone, there are 2 displays. There's one on the inside, one on the outside, so that requires 2 PC boards. There's microphones and speakers. All these things need to be made.
It's amazing that this has got so much in.
Exactly. There's different battery technologies. Some have different capacities to them. The PC board, this is the main intelligence of it. There's the gold.
There's a lot of gold in there, isn't
There's
it?
quite a bit on there.
I didn't realize
All
there was
sorts of
so
little
many
components, yeah. And then you're not even getting to the big part of the device itself, which is the housing.
There's always a life cycle involved with every product. Extraction really means, like, where are the raw materials coming from, right? You know, you've got crude oil and natural gas and chemicals going together to make the plastic, mainly for the housings of the phone. You've got metal, which has to be mined, ground, heated, treated with chemicals and electricity to really isolate the pure metal that's used in, again, the printed circuit board and the batteries.
Where are most of our phones being manufactured? I presume a lot are being manufactured in Asia.
The place where the phones are manufactured is halfway around the world for where most of the phones are consumed. So that's a big problem as well. The way it's structured in the USA, when you want to switch your service provider, you're
encouraged to sort of throw it away or get a new phone.
Exactly. One of the big things that providers are doing now is using the handset to create that emotional attachment. Our cell phone is so personal to us, the non-verbal method of self-expression.
Like, look at me, look at my new gadget.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
my outward sort of, image.
Every component has its eco-impact, but there is one essential metal that's keeping my mobile juiced with electricity, and it's getting a lot of attention these days. It's called tantalum, and it's refined from coltan ore.
The coltan is being used in these circuit
That's
boards.
one
part of
little
it.
part of it.
But it's having obviously a massive impact.
It has a massive impact, yep.
Up to 80% of the world's coltan is in one place, and it's a pretty long trip. But I've got some neighbors uptown who know a thing or two about coltan. Unfortunately, they haven't been taking my calls. Dr. James Deutsch directs the Wildlife Conservation Society's Africa program at the Bronx Zoo in New York.
There is a connection between my phone and these guys. Why am I here?
Well, this, like every piece of consumer electronics, this thing has inside of it a material called tantalum, which is made from a mineral called coltan, which is found, among other places, in the Congo, which is where these guys are from. It's used for things called capacitors, which hold electric charges. And the explosion of consumer electronics over the last 10 years is really what
pushed that.
Yeah, exactly. The Democratic Republic of Congo, where these gorillas are from, is one of the richest countries in the world. From coltan to gold, the scramble for the mineral has been a huge source of war and conflict and destruction of habitat.
And this is a big deal. not just for the gorillas, but for people too. The United Nations has said coltan mining was one of the main sources of funding for the groups fighting in a decade-long war in the Congo. It's been called the deadliest conflict since World War II.
But the other big problems they face, the first is bushmeat hunting. So the relatives of these guys right across the Congo Basin are still hunted for food. The whole coltan crisis is bringing people into the forest who aren't originally from there. They're not used to subsistence hunting. They're not used to growing their own food in the forest, and they need to be fed, and there's no other source of food for them.
Many cell phone companies have tried to avoid Congo-sourced coltan, but it's extremely difficult to trace where their coltan ultimately comes from. And at this time, there really isn't an effective replacement.
It's a big leap to make, isn't it, from a gorilla to mobile?
When you actually go to the real Congo rainforest, you drive through the bush in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly you come to a cell tower, and you pull out your mobile phone and you text your mother and tell her that things are okay. And we live in one world. And often when you go to really exotic places, you think you're in a different world, but you're not. We're all connected. These guys are here so that you and I and your kids can stick our noses to the glass and look into their eyes and realize that when we talk about wildlife conservation, when we talk about nature conservation, we're not only talking about science and carbon and something abstract, we're actually also talking about living beings.
Something furry and living that eats oranges and yams.
Something that's actually not all that different from us, you know?
Once the raw materials are extracted from the earth, it's on to the manufacturing process, which inevitably leads me to Northern California's Silicon Valley, the high-tech mecca of all those bits of tiny electronics that power our cell phones, computers, and other technology. You wouldn't think an average neighborhood like this could have lethal concentrations of chemicals hidden just underground. But Sheila Davis, head of the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition, knows that hazardous contamination can happen right in our backyards.
So this is, of course, an example of the type of chips that were made in the plants around here. And imagine that much smaller now for your cell phone.
Right. So my cell phone is packed full of these.
Your cell phone's packed full of those.
And these basically then go out looking very clean, no real understanding of what the implications are, the toxic implications, and
They're not dripping in your ear or anything
exactly.
like that.
Sort of it smells fine.
It smells fine, looks fine. Looks cool when you use it. I like my cell phone.
It's like, hi. But really, this is all creating a mess.
As the semiconductor business boomed in Silicon Valley, chemicals used in manufacturing were stored in underground tanks.
You have to store them someplace. And so instead of storing them above ground where they might catch on fire or where they're a big eyesore, they actually buried them underground.
Over time, 80% of these tanks developed LUST, the acronym for leaking underground storage tanks. And the chemicals ended up in local rivers, streams, and aquifers. Though the processes to make the electronic parts are much cleaner than in the past, and the computers have gotten smaller, there is still poison from years of manufacturing buried under the ground here. These areas full of hazardous waste underground are called Superfund sites, and Sheila's coalition monitors them closely. The highest concentration in the US is in Silicon Valley.
So you go to school right here.
And you're actually studying and playing right on top of a Superfund site.
This is right on top of the Superfund.
Right on top of the Superfund site.
At a Superfund site, the EPA has to take over cleanups of abandoned or uncontrolled hazardous waste.
Different sites had different amounts of chemicals that leaked into the water.
Affecting the aquifer.
The groundwater has been contaminated at most of the sites where the chemicals used to make these circuit boards and semiconductors were stored.
You know, we hear about these things like cancer clusters and you know, sort of these high rates of, you know, health disorders. Are we seeing anything like that?
That's what actually triggered a lot of the cleanup. So, for example, the birth defects in some neighborhoods were twofold what the national average would be.
I had no idea that something which looks so clean and is an everyday item was really creating such a mess.
It creates a mess at the beginning of its life in production as well as the end of life. So, unfortunately, it doesn't end right here.
So this is a phone-munching machine.
We call it our shredder.
There are hundreds of potentially toxic chemicals in any given cell phone.
Why are we continuing to produce these toxic time bombs?